We now will listen to the director of C3S, Carlo Buontempo, with an introductory keynote. Please welcome him.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think it's, can you hear me fine? I don't need to check whether I'm unmuted, as I've done over the last 2 years, which is a good start. And I think that's exactly what we missed, to be in the same room, to see that actually we have legs. It's not just the upper part of the body. That's what we want. I want to thank our generous host and keynote speakers that preceded me for this very useful introduction. It's a real pleasure to be here with you in The Hague, to be here with you in person in this venue. So it's an opportunity to connect. It's also an opportunity to look back. And I would like just to play a tribute to Jan Van Alderberg, because he's no longer with us, but he was instrumental in many phases of the first part of Copernicus, and in particular the work on attribution. And just to testify how committed he was, when I contacted him for congratulating his nomination in the 100 most influential people of the year, something that is quite rare for a climate scientist, he took the occasion to actually lobby in favor of climate attribution, continuing till the very, very few days. So it's a great loss, but it's also a great inspiration for us all. So I just talking to you today here after yet another Summer of Extremes event. So this the monthly bulletin we released last week on Thursday. I had to read the draft twice because I couldn't believe the size of the anomaly for the summer temperature this year. So it's 0.5 degree warmer than the summer temperature last year that was record-breaking then. So this is really, I keep saying every time we speak with newspaper and the general public, this is really an alarm bell, and this alarm has been ringing for a number of years, and we need really to take action. But the reason why I'm putting it here is that this also testify an attention for what we do that was never there. So the fact that when we came out with the monthly bulletin last week, in the space of a few days, it was picked up by all the major newspapers, notwithstanding the fact that there were many newsworthy events happening last week. And this is not just by accident. As Hugo was mentioning in his introduction, this is the result of a well-planned program. So this started well before the Paris Agreement was signed. It started with the Bavino Declaration. It started with a signature of the contribution agreement for C3S. C3S became operational in 2018, and now we are in a situation where, as Hugo was mentioning, we are well positioned to support and provide input into the priorities that the Commission and in general Europe is facing at this stage, and in particular the European Green Deal and the legislation associated to it. So, but the landscape is changing very rapidly. So when I started working on climate and on climate services nearly 20 years ago, there was still, the big question was, is climate changing? Are we responsible for it? And in a sense, the fourth assessment report was a bit of a turning point in that respect. Now it's no longer a discussion about that. It's a discussion about the priority for society. So if we look, for instance, at the World Economic Forum this year, listing the major risks that we are facing, the first 2 or 3, depending on how you looked at them, are directly or indirectly related to climate change. And these are not climate scientists. These are looking at the risk we are facing as a society. It's really coming from a different perspective. The fact that climate has become so important throughout society is here to stay, and this require good input and good information. The other point I want to pick up is that the decisions that are made require local knowledge, require understanding of the communities. So initiatives such as the mission on adaptation actually put the community at the center. The decision-making is not something happening at our level. It's something happening the bottom up. Now, the question is, how can you take an informed decision in the absence of good quality data? So we need to support this community, and the example we heard before me are just a very good example of that, by providing the right data and the good quality data. I like to think that over the last few years, so since we became operational in 2018, we've done a reasonable job. So if you look at the Climate Data Store, which is the center of our architecture, we are now close to 150,000 users, direct users registered on the Climate Data Store. I was hoping to reach 150,000 just we were at the GA, but I think maybe a couple of days short. And we are delivering a phenomenal amount of data to them. So of the order of 100 terabytes of data per day, responding to 500,000 requests. And this, I think, is a sign of the success of what we've done. And it's not the success only of ECNWF, it's the success of all the people that have been involved in every stage of this program. And many of you in this room have been absolutely essential in this. So thank you all. I think we deserve some level of happiness for all the hard work we have done. And this is reflected, as I was mentioning before, in the fact that we have an audience that we never had. We are not talking to the academia anymore. When these monthly bulletins come out, when the State of the Climate come out every year, then this regularly hit the newspaper, change the global discourse on climate change, and so on. And it's not, I mean, I'm talking here about the general audience, and the media is important, but it's really throughout society. And many, many actors downstream of C3S are using our data, using our information, and often we are not even aware of it. The state of the climate, though, remain the pivotal point for many of our output. This year was released on Earth Day, and every year tend to happening close to that day in April, and really attracts a huge audience internationally. So, looking at our portfolio has not changed. It's something that stays pretty much similar for Copernicus 1 to Copernicus 2. We cover from the observation of the past, passing through reanalysis, and we heard the reference to reanalysis before, towards seasonal prediction and climate projection. All of it, so it's a first step towards that integration that we were talking about before. All this data is available on the same platform, using same standard, and is interoperable. So I will just rapidly go through some of these elements, just highlighting where we are at the moment and what's happening in the near future, starting with the observation. We use the concept of the global climate observing system of the essential climate variable. This year is the year when the new implementation plan of GCAS has been finalized and will be officially launched at COP very soon, and Han will talk about GCAS very soon. But there is one aspect I want to highlight of the new implementation plan of GCAS, and it's, in a sense, is the recognition of the fact that on top of the need of closing the cycle of water, energy, carbon, and so on, there is also the need of responding to a community of users that goes beyond science. These are a social priority, is no longer just a climate priority. And in a sense, we have started this process. So what you see in this image are all the essential climate variables we provide access to. And we looked at, so those encircled are the one we provide access to, and we try to prioritize, starting from the requirement of our user, what are the things that we would like to see implemented in the future. We are not doing this alone, far from it. We rely on a huge community of, well, you really, a huge community of scientists and experts in the different fields. And we rely also on a very strong partnership with EUMETSAT and with ESA. Jörg Schulz will talk about some of the activities we do together in the reanalysis session, and Susanne will talk about some of the activities on ESA, in particular on ESA CCI, that have been very important for us. So it's not just satellite observation. A lot has actually happened over the last few years in terms of in situ observation. Both the rescuing of all data, the access to the reference network, the access to the gridded network, all of these, you see on the right, the entries in the catalog, all of these data are available. And this effort is important because the reanalysis that we mentioned before, well, reanalysis are a great consumer of data. Mainly satellite data. Satellite data is very important. So in the post-satellite era, the volume of data coming into the reanalysis has grown massively. But also in situ data, especially for the early part of the record, is fundamental. And there is an important element here, and it's the fact that if you look at the mixture, where is this data coming from? well, you realize that there is a shift, a significant shift in the last 20 years, and the fraction of European data going into the system has increased very significantly, an indication of the investment that Europe has made in the space segment. Okay. This actually looks a bit different from what was looking on my laptop, but the message stays pretty much the same. Reanalysis is the central product of ours. The ERA 5 improved significantly on the previous reanalysis, the ERA interim, and has been fundamental for a number of sectors, so starting from the science community that relies heavily onto ERA 5, but also looking at the Ipcc. So ERA 5 has been one of the cornerstone data set used extensively within the last assessment report of the Ipcc. And as I was mentioning before, ERA 5 ERA 5 data I use day in, day out in our climate monitoring. One of the things that has happened recently has been the extension, the back extension of ERA 5 back to the 1950s. And this links very nicely with the talk we heard about the Delta program. This is actually an image of those terrible flooding of the 1953 that affected this country very significantly and a good chunk of northwestern Europe. So with major damages and a number of fatalities. And when ECNWF opened its activities in Reading, so a few years back, the Dutch government provided a gift. It was this tapestry that was reproducing the pressure field of that terrible storm. This is still hanging in the council room at ECNWF. What you see at the bottom, and this is actually a lovely piece of work of our colleague Baudouin, is a reproduction of the same pattern of pressure using a similar color scale, digital in this case, using the back extension of ERA 5. So ERA 5 is capable, to a large extent, to reproduce that terrible storm. And this is important because if we look throughout our portfolio, one of the most important elements is in any assessment of the climate risk is the assessment of the current risk. So having a good understanding of our baseline risk is fundamental. But we don't want to stop there. We want to move forward. So the next big thing for us is ERA 6. And a lot of work is already ongoing into the preparation of ERA 6. ERA 6 is likely to start production, is expected to start production in Q1 2024, using one of the latest cycle of the IFS, our operational model. It will be higher resolution than ERA 5. It will be coupled with the ocean up to a certain extent, and we believe it will serve our user even better than ERA 5 does at the moment. It's important, though, there is a time window of roughly 12 months now where we can still do change things on the setting of ERA 5. So if you have strong requirement on what you would like to see in ERA 6, let us know now is a good time. And it's not just the global reanalysis, it's also all the work that has gone into the regional reanalysis. As you know, we have two domains, one European domain, the SERA dataset, and a pan-Arctic domain. Well, at the moment it's two Arctic domains, the CARA dataset. Both of them are now available through the Climate Data Store. And what we decided to do for this regional reanalysis is to invest in the Arctic. Arctic is warming much faster than the rest of the planet, is one of the hot spots for climate change. And so for the next phase, we will have a very high-resolution pan-Arctic domain that will be run operationally and updated regularly in terms of reanalysis. Moving slightly forward from observation, so we've done observation, satellite and in situ, we've done reanalysis. Logically, the next step is looking in the future. And what we do looking in the future is the seasonal prediction. These are coming from a variety of players, so all the European Global Producing Center, as well as in-kind contribution from extra European centers. And as you see over the time, from 2016 to now, things have become richer in terms of variety of model, in terms of ancillary information, in terms of output. And it's not just us talking about seasonal prediction or using seasonal prediction. There is a growing set of users downstream of us that pick our data and, for instance, tweet about it. And some of these heavy tweeter, I think, are tweeting at the moment as we speak, because some of them are in the room. But I think this is a good sign of the fact that what we are doing is interesting, is having an impact on society. And what I found particularly interesting is the top right plot, which shows the distribution of our user, so where this user are coming from. And of all data set, the seasonal prediction are the data set that attracts the largest fraction on non-academic user. So these are not the people in our research center. These are private companies. These are people working in the energy sector. These are consultants and financial market experts and the like. So that's, for me, is a sign of relevance. And I just want to close this rapid snapshot about seasonal prediction, look at the seasonal prediction of this last summer. This, is, as I mentioned, has been a record-breaking summer. And if you look at the probability of the most likely tercile in the above, on the left for temperature, on the right for precipitation. And if you look at the verification at the bottom, so the anomalies that actually have been recorded, you see a striking similarity. So this was the prediction made back in May for June, July, and August. And having spoken with many people who do seasonal prediction over the last few months, I think there is a discussion on whether this anomaly was captured for the right reason or not. Nevertheless, as a signal, it's very striking, the similarity between the predicted signal and the verification later. Doing an extra step, and I should have said the QR code on the top should lead you to the page where more information can be obtained, as well as the data. An extra step is the climate projection. So is the access to CMAP 6 on top of CMAP 5, and there's been, over the last year, a significant shift from one to the other. Is the access to Cordex data, not just in Europe, but all over the world. But more importantly for me is the work that we are now doing with the Ipcc Climate Atlas. So this was one of the novelty of the last assessment report, the fact that it wasn't just a report, it was an interactive atlas. That interactive atlas, by design, because of the Ipcc process, needs to be frozen, cannot be updated, needs to be a reference point, while at the same time there is an appetite to have up-to-date information using the most recent, for instance, reanalysis data. So we are working with the University of Cantabria to ensure that this can be done, and the first milestone of that activity is approaching very rapidly, and it's expected, significant changes are expected over the next 12 months or so. I talked about data extensively, looking throughout the entire portfolio, but behind the concept of the climate data store is the fact that the climate data store has a soul on its own, and move. That's strange. Okay. Very much so. Sorry about that. That the climate data store is not just access to data, is access to traceable way of manipulating, post-processing, transforming that data. So this was an example of an application that we put together, and probably is the simplest of the application, taking the rise in the global mean temperature. And well, I know what's in the other slide, so while they fix the presentation, I can keep talking. But basically, that application was looking at an extrapolation of the global mean temperature using ERA 5, and was updated regularly. And was one of the most popular application, it still is one of the most popular application we have on the climate data store. So the idea is that you have traceable, open and free data as a backend. You have a traceable way of transforming that data that anyone can use, and that's the key of the offering. So we have done it for, now there is even the animation. That's beautiful. Where you can actually interact with the data yourself. But the point is not, you've seen many of these interactive applications. It's not new. What is, for me, interesting and new is the fact that the data is open and the entire system is fully traceable. So all the code is available. We have done it as an example for the global mean temperature, but we have done it for a specific sector, energy being one. So here you see some of the output of those interactive pages for energy variables. And we work very closely with energy regulator and with the organization on the network for transmission system operator for electricity. So it's really not the academia. We are working with the people who are taking decisions these days about how to cope with the challenges that our system face. And energy, I would say, has never been as important as it is now in the European horizon. We've done it for energy, we've done it for water, and we keep those as well as a couple of other sectors as what we call operational services. So the idea is that we keep running those as an example on what can be done with the data, but also as an engagement tool to engage with the communities in these specific sectors. Something that is happening and will happen within the next couple of years is modernization of the climate data store. So the climate data store has been at the center of everything we've done. What we want to do next is to merge the climate data store with the atmospheric data store in something that we call the climate and atmosphere data store, or CADS, but also take on board a lot of the development that have occurred over the last few years. So in a sense, the idea behind the climate data store is now almost a decade old. A lot of things have changed, a lot of new packages have become available. So we are rethinking completely the approach of the climate data store, giving even more flexibility and easier access for users. One of the novelty will be that it will be easier to work on the data offline, to write your script offline and not just on the online system. And probably you've seen this slide because I've used it in other presentations myself. This was the basic idea behind the climate data store. The idea is that you have petabyte of data on the one hand, and you have this kilobyte of information on the other. And you want to put together a system that maps one onto the other in a traceable and transparent way. I would like to argue that there is another important element to stress in this stack, and it's the feedback loop. So having this contact with these hundreds of thousands of users downstream allow us to understand what is missing, what is important to them. And we are collecting those requirements systematically. We have a very extensive user support team that respond to the queries of our user. But we also have an evaluation and quality control that analyze this requirement and then provide recommendation for what needs to be done. So the activities of the EQC, EQC has changed quite a bit between Copernicus 1 and Copernicus 2. The activities of the EQC is starting now, and the activity of analysis on the user requirement has not yet started, but is starting very soon, and it will be fundamental in shaping the next step of the program. In this large, and referring back to what Hugo was saying, in this large or rich landscape of users, the core user of ours, the authorities at the European level, and so on, I just want to mention a few that I think are likely to become particularly important. One is the European Investment Bank, and we signed recently a Memorandum of Understanding with the European Investment Bank. And again, I was quite surprised because normally, at least 10, 15 years ago, financial institutions were not particularly climate savvy. And when discussing with the European Investment Bank, and they would speak later at the assembly, I discovered how competent they were, how much they knew about the data we had. And this is really, for me, a big tectonic shift. The other element I want to mention is our connection with the European Environment Agency, and in particular with Climate Adapt. There's a strong collaboration that we have with them. So actually, there is really a data link that provides indicator to EEA directly from the climate data store. It's only strengthening over time, also thanks to initiatives such as the European Climate Risk Assessment that is starting now. I'm just wrapping up now, on an important element of this complex landscape. And this is what is already happening at the national level. So is very rich, especially in Europe, with many countries having extensive climate service programs, certainly the Netherlands being one of the leaders there. And what we want to do in this new phase of Copernicus is ensure that what we do can help our member state provide their services and serve their user. So something we are launching now, following the example of CAMS, of our sister project, is the National Collaboration Program that will support further our member state, and we will discuss with our member state how to serve their needs better. So I conclude here, and I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you all a great General Assembly.